Okay, I think we'll go ahead and get started. So hello, everyone, and welcome to the third Grow Your Own Laboratory Workforce Seminars. My name is Susan Harrington. I'll be moderating today. We have a great lineup of speakers, but before I get to that, I want to just take a moment and say a happy Medical Laboratory Professionals Week to all of you and give you my personal thanks for the hard work and attention to detail I know you provide in your role as laboratory professionals every day. I hope that wherever you are, you and your teams are feeling proud of what you do and you're receiving appreciation and recognition from your clinical colleagues. I can tell you that around me, there's a lot going on, but everyone is really enjoying having their moment to reflect on their value to patients and their value as part of the healthcare team. I can tell you that I even have a sign in my front yard, and I'm hoping that all the dog walkers that pass by my house every day are noticing and considering the role of the medical laboratory professionals. So we have a couple of disclosures related to this seminar. And I want to share with you the QR code. This takes you to the Grow Your Own website. Past webinars are posted there, and the recording from today's webinar will be posted at a later date. So while you're taking a picture of the QR code, let me provide just a little background on this seminar series. As we all know, we're dealing with the workforce shortage these days. It's been very difficult to hire and retain laboratory professionals. But we're a resilient group, and many of our laboratory colleagues are finding ways to deal with this situation. And the Grow Your Own webinar series, sponsored by ASCP, is highlighting some of those novel approaches to recruitment and retention and educational strategies for laboratory professionals. These are strategies that your colleagues are implementing around the country, and we hope you'll be able to take away some ideas that you can that will help you in your setting. So today we're particularly focusing on programs developed for underserved settings or ways to add educational programs in geographic areas where they are lacking. So we have three speakers today, and each will give a short presentation, and I'll introduce each speaker right before they provide their presentation. So we have Michelle Butina from West Virginia University, Nathan Johnson from the University of Arkansas for Medical Sciences, and Michael Weitzel, pardon me, from a pathologist program at the University of Tennessee. If you have questions, we'd love to hear those questions, but please put them in the chat, and we'll monitor the chat throughout the talk and have a QA time at the end of the series. So I'm going to stop sharing my slides now and invite Dr. Butina to share her slides while I introduce her. So Dr. Michelle Butina has been teaching in medical laboratory science programs for over 20 years. She's currently the MLS Program Director and Vice Chair at West Virginia University. Prior to coming to West Virginia, she served as the MLS Program Director at the University of Kentucky for 8 years. For the majority of the past 14 years, she's also served as a clinical coordinator, and she's seen the severity of the current laboratory personnel workforce shortage firsthand. During her time at the University of Kentucky, she worked alongside an outstanding team of staff, faculty, and administrators that launched an MLS program in Kentucky's Appalachian region. So welcome, Michelle, and can't wait to hear your talk.
Thank you, Susan. So as Susan mentioned, I am going to be talking about addressing Kentucky's need in the rural area with medical laboratory scientists. So I was the program director there for 8 years. I started in July of 2010. And one of the first goals I was tasked with was to launch the medical laboratory science program at one of our rural campuses. So just to give you a snapshot of what the College of Health Sciences looked like back in the early 2010, 2011, we did offer 9 programs but we offered some of those at multiple locations. So our main campus was, of course, in Lexington, Kentucky, very urban, but we did have 2 rural campuses. I'll first talk about Moorhead, which is up 64. It's about an hour away past Mount Sterling. It is also a rural site at the Center for Health, Education, and Research, located beside our Moorhead Hospital. And it was a shared facility, is a shared facility with Moorhead State University. And then the site I'm going to talk about is the one circled in Hazard. It's in the Appalachian region at the Center of Excellence in Rural Health that I'm going to talk more about on the next few slides. So Hazard, Kentucky, I have it circled here on the map. It is certainly in the Appalachian regions. The entire eastern part of Kentucky is. It's the counties in this area are mining dependent. Unfortunately, low education, low employment, persistent poverty, population loss counties. Only about 9% of adults have a bachelor's degree in this area. So this is the area where the Center of Excellence in Rural Health is. And that center was actually legislatively mandated in 1990 by a Senate bill that basically tasked this center with the mission of improving the health of rural Kentuckians through education, research, service, and community engagement. So there is a lot this center does for the area. Its focus is rural health. The educational programs currently include a residency program, the medical laboratory science program from the University of Kentucky's College of Health Science, as well as their physical therapy program. Social work is out of the University of Kentucky in a different college. So this just gives you a snapshot of some of the programs, and this actually is our medical laboratory science lab in the picture. The other goals, I kind of give you a few snapshots here of what else they have, their outreach services, what they do for the community. They have leadership programs, they have enrichment camps for K through 12 students, they have support groups offered out of the center, and they do a lot in rural health research. They always have a research day. Their students get involved, so they're really strong in rural health research as well at the center. So to go back, I was tasked with launching a medical laboratory science program at this center. Fortunately, the physical therapy program had been there since the start, and they were wonderful to model after. But we took about a year to plan this. We first had to determine the sustainability of a program at the center. So we did some workforce needs. We came up with a timeline. We had to find the student pipelines or educational partners. We had to make certain we had clinical site support, hiring faculty, projecting a budget. So I'm going to walk through some of this just to give you an idea of what we went through. The program did launch in August of 2012. So we started looking at our workforce needs. Again, we didn't want to launch a program that would not be sustainable. So we had our national workforce needs, and then we looked at the Kentucky workforce needs. I can tell you there was and still is 3 MLS programs in Kentucky. So University of Kentucky was one, and about 8 MLT programs. I think that number has gone up. But there was no way these programs were meeting the projected need that we were looking at in 2010 and 2011. This is maybe a little bit blurry, but it's kind of was what we were thinking in the background. We were looking at where Hazard was located. So we were looking at the other programs in relation to that, our MLT, our MLS. As you see, there's no other MLS programs. The closest was Lexington, 2.5 hours, and then Eastern Kentucky and Richmond, which was about 2 hours away. We were looking, the red pens represent possible clinical sites, all in that rural eastern part of Kentucky. We did go southern as well. We were even looking into Virginia. So kind of gives you a snapshot of how we were picturing this. So we did determine that we could sustain. There was a need. We could sustain a program. I can tell you it's still there, 12 years, still going. So the next obstacle was, would we be able to get students, and would we have partnerships to pull these students from? So we looked at the 2-year institutions. There was 4, and there's even one in Hazard Technical and Community College, which we did pull a lot of students from. We also pulled from 4-year institutions, so students with bachelors in biology and chemistry that wanted to stay in the region, but there is no jobs in that area for those degrees. So we would pull them through and run them through our MLS program. You'll notice our recruitment was a little bit different approach in the rural area. We worked with the recruiter there at the center who had us do a lot of newspaper ads and radio ads. The center even paid for a local commercial on the TV. So otherwise, probably social media, summer camps, and open houses we're all familiar with. We also, in that planning year, got commitment letters from 6 clinical sites that were all rural, all local, all in the Appalachian. Those commitment letters turned into affiliation agreements so that we were confirming that we had sites to send these students to. So, checking off all these challenges and roadblocks we were overcoming, hiring a faculty member is also very challenging in a rural area, at least for us, we found. In 12 years, we went through 3. So initially had one for a couple years, had one just for 1 year. The last one we hired is actually, she's been there 8 years. She was from the first graduating class. She is from the area. She loves it. She has gotten an advanced degree. So what has worked for us is the grow your own approach. I know it is a struggle though at the center for the other programs to find faculty as well. Next we had to look up how are we going to outfit the lab. So what did we need instrumentation wise? We had to estimate our cost. We had to obtain funding. And as we all know, MLS programs are expensive. So the first few years we were a cost, and now we're in much better shape. So we did, this is pictures of our lab and our prep room. We were able to start outfitting our lab with microscopes and some of the basic instrumentation through a foundation grant. And that was actually an Appalachian grant as well, to get spectrophotometers and microscopes. And you can see we can hold about 12 students in this lab. So the program did launch, as I mentioned, in August of 2012. We started with 7 students. So our class sizes are small. We go anywhere from about 4 to 12 students. We have 1 full-time faculty member there at the center. That faculty member teaches all the labs. I'm going to talk more about the pedagogy on the next couple slides. She serves as clinical coordinator, proctors all the exams. Regular faculty member, so even though this faculty member is 2.5 hours apart, participates in all college and center committees and does have a commitment to some scholarly activities, just as all of us on the Lexington campus. All our faculty members at the other 2 rural campuses have these same commitments. How we teach there, though, it follows the same program as we do on the Lexington campus. It's an 18-month program. The lecture and the lab courses, though, are delivered on site at the center. So lectures are done synchronously through interactive video, which is at all 3 sites. So the faculty are lecturing from Lexington to a classroom in Hazard. The lab is in Hazard, and like I said, the full-time faculty member in Hazard teaches all the labs. Now, the faculty in Lexington do travel to Hazard, and we do what we call reverse lecturing there. So I do have a picture that shows the classrooms with the screens. Now, this was pre-COVID, so ITV is an older technology. I'm sure you can do more Zoom and virtual platforms, but the technology's been there in Kentucky for years and still works, and we still use it. Other pictures up here is our student lounge, our study rooms for the students. The center has a great facility for these students. When they go out to rotations the last semester for about 16 weeks, they're sent to all rural sites because almost all these students want to stay near home. It's almost an expectation in Kentucky that they stay at home. They're expected to get a job and stay at home. So we try to keep them in rural sites, and that full-time faculty member at the center serves as the clinical coordinator. So how has this worked out over the last 12 years? So as I've mentioned, we've had varying class sizes, but out of the last 12 years, and the first graduating class was in 13, we've had 70 graduates. Almost all of them are employed near that region. They're pretty much stayed in the rural region of South and Eastern Kentucky. Again, we've had a faculty member there for 8 years. She's very active in all our committees. The center's doing great as far as its research, outreach, and its educational programs. So overall, we have found this model worked really well. We were fortunate, as I've mentioned, physical therapy had been there a long time. At the Moorhead campus, we have physician assistants. That's been there for quite a number of years. So we had models to use to project our program, and we believe our outcomes demonstrate that it has gone very well. We are going to save questions to the end. So at this time, I will pass it back to Susan. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Bettina. That was wonderful and so inspiring. I am just in awe of what you've done there, and we'll have some questions at the end. So next, let me introduce Dr. Nathan Johnson, and Dr. Johnson, you can get your slides together, get those shared. So Dr. Johnson currently serves as Professor, Chair, and Program Director of Laboratory Sciences at the University of Arkansas for Medical Sciences. Dr. Johnson retired from the United States Air Force in the rank of colonel and is professionally certified in multiple clinical and administrative areas. He's volunteered for ASCP in a number of capacities, and I know he's passionate about enhancing the workforce in rural and other underserved parts of the country. So welcome, Dr. Johnson.
Thank you so much, and I really appreciate the ability to be here and share with you a few ideas today. Just a short disclaimer on my end, I'm going to be sharing some information that are truly my views and not the views of any other organization. First off, I'd like to thank the faculty at UAMS. We have a very vibrant faculty, super to work with, so fun. I enjoy going to work every day with these fine folks, and they help me do the things that I like to do, which is share information like this. So I titled this slide, Houston or anywhere in the country, we've got a problem. There's a serious shortage of laboratory professionals. You all know that. There's a shortage of laboratory training programs, just like Dr. Bettina just said. In Kentucky, you go anywhere in the country and you're going to find that. We have a shortage of laboratory professionals who have the time to train others, because coming with a shortage, individuals are super busy, and so they really don't have time to train. And we have a couple of other variables that are impacting us. Number one is the drop of the number of students who are interested in going to college. We're seeing that. We're also seeing a drop in the birth rate that happened few years ago, and it's starting to impact the number of students who are wanting to go to college or have the ability to go to college. So we have two different things: the number of students who will go to college and the number of students who can go to college. and the financial limitations of educational pursuits. And so that those things all added together cause us to have some issues. And in the rural areas, we're seeing even more issues. And for some hospital laboratories, it's very critical right now. Aging of the workforce, the laboratory administrative managers and directors do not know where the next replacement is going to come from. Limited financial resources, maybe not able to compete. Lower population densities, and also quality of life considerations. I can tell you for our own campus program, we get students from rural areas quite often, but very rarely will they go back to those rural areas. And so coming up with incentives or ways to entice students to come to rural areas sometimes is very difficult. So just a very quick overview. I'm going to go over this very quickly because I think most of you already know this. Laboratories must meet minimally CLIA requirements. And in states with licensure, you're going to have to meet those state licensure requirements. Not so much in all rural areas, but maybe in some you may have system-wide requirements for certain aspects such as certification. But no matter what those requirements are, if a graduate of a NACLS accredited laboratory training program who's also credentialed with a certification applies for a job, generally they're going to meet those minimum requirements. And certainly in rural laboratories, they are always very welcome. However, currently, many labs aren't able to find employees to hire graduates from programs. So what is the outcome of this? In non-licensure states, many laboratories have been hiring individuals who have not been formally trained. CLIA requires education and training. That education is pretty standard, chemistry, biology, et cetera. And the training is usually accomplished on the job, and it's up to the laboratory to make sure that happens. I've already mentioned that laboratories don't really have the time to train adequately, so that's a problem. And prior education doesn't always mean that it's going to be a great fit. Just because you have a bachelor's degree in science does not mean that you have been trained well enough or have the background to work in a clinical laboratory. And I always share this example, and this happened a couple years ago, but a colleague of mine was working with someone who had a bachelor's degree in chemistry who was hired to help meet this shortage. And the individual was working alone at night in the blood bank and asked this question: what is hemolysis? I've been working here 3 months and I hear this word all the time. I have no idea what it means. And so that's a situation where an individual may meet the CLIA requirements for education, but certainly not for training. And just as Dr. Bettina had mentioned before, there are many areas of the country which just do not have an MLT or MLS program nearby. And on this slide, you'll see 4 different maps. The one in the top left-hand corner is the population density of the United States. Top right-hand corner is where our MLS programs are at. Bottom left corner is where the MLT programs are at. And the bottom right corner is just a combination of the MLT and MLS programs. And you will see there are wide areas where there's nothing. 100, 200 miles, et cetera, and just nothing. And so in those areas, which are generally the rural areas, where are those individuals, where the hospital is going to find individuals to work? And that's the problem. At UAMS, we developed a workforce model, and this is a national model that looked at the needs that we projected based on a lot of different variables. And I won't really go into the details of how we did this, other than to say that currently our model shows that there's a shortfall of about 9,000 positions per year being produced by the educational training programs. And you may say, well, the training programs need to work harder. Well, we all need to work very hard to fill all of our seats. However, if all of the programs in the country, the NACLS accredited programs, produced at their maximum, what they say right now is their maximum, we can produce 7,000 to 8,000 graduates a year, but the need is about 16,000 to 17,000 per year. Each year it stacks upon each other, it compounds. And so this is where we're starting to see the problem. So moving forward, it's very easy to see why laboratories could be certainly filled with individuals who are half trained with NACLS trained personnel, and maybe half not filled or with some other type of training or some other type of personnel. Last year, there was a great publication by Dr. Mary Beth Flaws. And at the time, she was the president of NACLS. And she examined what happens when we have too few NACLS graduates from programs for an extended period of time. And she came up with 3 outcomes that were possible. Number one is an increase in non-accredited programs. These would be the proprietary programs, not necessarily meaning that they're bad, but they're going to have more variability in the type of training and the type of graduate that they produce. The second would be an increase in the on-the-job trained personnel. And again, in this current environment, it can work, but it's not optimal. The third outcome is an increase in non-traditional educational pathways and certification pathways. And while that's not traditional with what we've seen historically in this country, it probably is the best case scenario given the shortage that we're having. But what happens ultimately with these non-optimal outcomes? We could have a devaluation of accreditation and certification because individuals, if they see that there's a pathway that's faster and doesn't cost as much money, they may choose that. And that's just natural human behavior. When we see that decrease in students choosing programs, NACLS accredited programs, then you're going to see programs closing. And when you see programs closing, fewer of these graduates coming out, you're going to see a lack of professionalism or a decrease in professionalism and just other issues that, as you could just imagine, are going to come with that. And so if you haven't had a chance to read this, I would definitely take the time, take 4 or 5 minutes to read this. Really one of the best things I've seen in a long time. And so my time is coming to a close, but I want to just share some information with you on some things that you can do. If you're working in a rural lab, what can you do? There are 6 ways that I think that you can make an impact. Number one is work with your professional organizations. The Workforce Coalition that's been underway here for the last year or so is really a great effort. Put your support behind your professional organization. Help them. They're advocating for you. You need to be an advocate for them. Support them. And also support those alternate pathways. The ASCP Board of Certification has alternate pathways for individuals who maybe can't go to a traditional program like I have at UAMS. And in many cases, that may be the only way somebody can get trained and join the profession. And so it's much better to have someone under the umbrella being a professional, being certified, even if it's just a categorical certification if they're already working. The second way you can help is to work with the MLT and MLS programs that are out there and existing. There's about 450, 460 programs out there. And so whichever program is closest to you, volunteer to be a clinical site. Help them find students. As Dr. Bettina said, a lot of times individuals don't want to leave the rural areas. So if you work in a rural hospital and you find somebody that's sharp, they want to get involved in the medical community, they want to make an impact in their local community, direct them to one of the programs and let us see if we can help find a way to get them formal training. And again, support the non-traditional pathways. Many laboratory training programs provide education to help you. I've mentioned several times the labs are too busy to train, but the educational training programs, the MLS programs and the MLT programs, many of them will and can provide that education and training to help supplement those individuals if they're already working for you. You can also work with local universities and colleges. Help start a program. We need more programs. Dr. Bettina mentioned how difficult it is to get faculty. If there's any of you who hear me who think that you might want to be a faculty one day, please raise your hand and volunteer. In the state of Arkansas right now, we have a community college who has already been funded for an MLT program. They already have the equipment. They already have the lab built. They can't get a faculty member to even apply for that position. So any of you, if you're interested, please let me know. because we need more MLT and more MLS programs. We probably need about double the number we have right now. When the hospital-based programs closed, many of them closed 20, 30 years ago. It really made a big negative impact on the number of ways that we can help support laboratories, especially regionally. Now, at the hospital level, again, doing everything that you can to start a new program. We need more hospital-based programs, supporting non-traditional students, hosting students for clinical sites, et cetera. Now, at the laboratory level, you can truly make a difference in a rural area, even if you do not have a program close to you, by growing your own. There's a model that has been used by quite a few laboratory managers and administrative directors, where you can start with someone who is a phlebotomist or a laboratory assistant and grow them. There are plenty of very good online MLT programs there. If you will provide that individual with the clinical training opportunity, they can take those didactics online. Weber State, North Ark, and there's many other schools out there. Just take a look, and if you need a connection with one of those, I'd be happy to help do that for you. But you can grow your own. You just have to have willing individuals to do that who are committed. And finally, you as a laboratory professional, you need to promote the profession. You need to help us find students. And if you have any questions, reach out to a program. The faculty at medical laboratory programs all across the country are just waiting to hear from you. And I know, for example, at UAMS, if you call me, I will do anything I can to help you in any way possible, help you meet those needs. And with that, just a beautiful picture of UAMS in Little Rock, Arkansas, great campus, and I'm fortunate to work here. And with that, I will pass it on.
Okay, thanks, Dr. Johnson. That was great. A couple of references in there that I wasn't aware of, so I appreciate your perspective and information. While you stop sharing and Michael Weitzel begins sharing, let me provide an introduction for him. So in 2021, the University of Tennessee Health Science Center hired Michael to be the program director for the newly developing Pathologist Assistance Program. Prior to this, he spent 6 years as the clinical coordinator for the Loma Linda University Pathologist Assistant Program. Michael is a cum laude graduate of the West Virginia University School of Medicine PA program. He started his career in pathology as a pathology technician while an undergraduate at Intermountain Medical Center in Murray, Utah. So those interactions really matter to get people into the workforce. Today, we're fortunate to learn from his experience about providing a PA program in a region of the country that was underserved in terms of these laboratory professionals. So welcome, Michael.
Thank you, Dr. Harrington. I'm very excited to be here today. I would like to talk to everyone about encouraging, educating, and empowering the future generation of laboratory professionals. As Dr. Harrington said, my name is Michael Weitzel, and I am the program director for the University of Tennessee Health Science Center's Pathologist Assistant Program. As I reflect on my journey into laboratory medicine, it began as an undergrad at Weber State University in Utah. I had decided that the pathway to being a physician was not in my cards, and I spent this time working in a research laboratory, sort of lost, not knowing what my future held. One day, a colleague approached me, actually a fellow student approached me, and she said, "We're hiring at the hospital. I work in a room called the gross room. Yes, that's a real name of a room in the hospital, and I think you like this work." At the time, I was doing frozen sections on bird muscle, doing immunohistochemical and hematoxylin eosin stains by hand in the lab. I had a bunch of questions about this so-called gross room, and she was very helpful in answering my questions. I decided to apply, and I was hired. I became a pathology technician at Intermountain Medical Center, their central laboratory in Murray, Utah. This was such a cool job. I had no idea that this realm of a profession even existed, let alone that you could use a scalpel and some scissors and dissect some gallbladders and appendices and look at some biopsies. It was very invigorating until I met the ASCP certified pathologist's assistants. It blew my mind that there were people who worked every day to dissect human tissue to evaluate cancer. I had all sorts of questions, including where they went to school, what did it take, how did you make it happen? I was a non-traditional student at the time and had some unique challenges if I was to go to graduate school. They were very patient with me. They helped me. They encouraged me. They guided me. They educated me. They gave me everything that I needed to feel like I could potentially become a pathologist's assistant. So I applied. I was admitted to the West Virginia University School of Medicine Pathologist Assistant Program. That included a big move across the country for my young wife, myself, and our 3 young daughters. It was a big change. I received a lot of encouragement from people back home, including those pathologist assistants who helped get me into pathologist assistant school. While I was there, I developed a professional relationship with my program director, Miss Sherry Germain, a recent ASCP mastership recipient. She was my program director, and she provided a lot of support that I needed as a non-traditional student in graduate school. During my time there, she left West Virginia to go to Southern California to begin a new pathologist assistant program at Loma Linda University. Our professional relationship was such that she encouraged me to apply to work under her in this new program, and I did. I was hired by Loma Linda University to be the clinical coordinator for this new pathologist assistant program that was undergoing its initial accreditation. While I was there, I had very unique opportunities to get exposure to 1, program administration, but 2, NACLs. Sherry was very encouraging. She wanted me to get involved with NACLs. She wanted me to get involved with volunteering with ASCP, both of which I did. I was there for 5.5 years and then received an email one day. It had been forwarded to me, and they were looking for a program director at the University of Tennessee in Memphis. This was something that felt extraordinarily daunting at the time. I did not feel that this was, if I'm to be vulnerable about it, I didn't feel like this was something that I would be able to accomplish. I needed some empowerment. I needed some courage. In discussions with my wife, as well as with Sherry and other colleagues, I decided to apply. And lo and behold, here we are, Memphis, Tennessee. I moved out here in July of 21 to start a pathologist's assistant program. It has been a very informative process, learning the ins and outs firsthand of what it takes to start a graduate school. One of the initial hurdles that we needed to get over was that of the Tennessee Higher Education Commission in the state of Tennessee. All higher education programs need to be essentially go through an accreditation process at the state level. We worked through this and were approved in July of 2022. We had a very quick turnaround. Our application opened, our admissions was very quick to act, and we began in January of 2023 with the admission of 6 students. We also hired 1 full-time faculty member. In April of that same year, we had submitted our NACL's initial program application and had it approved. That year went by very fast. In January of 2024, we admitted 10 new students. 7 students began their second year of the program, their clinical rotations. We had actually admitted a transfer student, and we hired an additional full-time faculty member just this last month. It has been a learning it has been a learning process. We are still working through our initial accreditation and hope to achieve it in 2025. We are located, like I said, in Memphis, Tennessee. Now, there are only 15 accredited pathologist assistant programs in the country, and that includes a few that are in Canada. We are far and few in between, with the majority of them being on the East Coast. Here in Memphis, we are the only one in the Mid-South, with the closest other programs being in Duke and Chicago and in Texas. My journey continues, and I welcome that journey. And each step along the way, I can reflect and look back and identify those people who have helped play pivotal roles in my professional and personal development. As I've reflected on this, I think it came down to three themes. I needed encouragement. I needed someone who had walked the path before me, who could guide me. And at times when maybe I wasn't as courageous within myself, I needed someone who could see that in me and provide me empowerment. I'd like to take a moment and ask a few reflective questions. I think each of us has a unique and potentially inspiring path. So I would ask you, how did you get to where you are? Where did you start? What were some of the challenges that you faced along the way? Who in this journey of yours inspired, helped you, motivated you, particularly when you may have felt unsure? What did they do to help you? Why was their assistance meaningful? I think as each of us reflects on the answers to these questions, we might begin to feel a sense of gratitude, but also hopefully a need to pay it forward. My case today is that it is through encouragement, education, and empowerment that each of us can advance in our career, as well as build the future generation of laboratory professionals. I would start with encouragement. It begins with professional relationships, relationships that are built on trust. For those of us who find ourselves in management, I think this is key. The people who we oversee need to trust us. They also need to know that we are humans just like them. Get to know them. Get to know your coworkers, the technicians, the assistants, the entry-level positions. Get to know those people and be personable, professional, and genuine. If and when the time is right, I would encourage you to probe, to ask about their education, their status. Hey, what are you doing as a technician? Do you plan on staying here forever? Probe, ask. Eventually, if the time is right, encourage them to apply and to further that education. Maybe it would require them strengthening their application and needing some encouragement to reapply. I think that it's important that as we develop these relationships with people and as we attempt to build this future generation, that we listen when they share challenges, doubts, and fears. Each of us has experienced challenges, doubts, and fears, and overcome many of them. I think as we empathetically listen and share our experiences, we can help guide and encourage those who might walk a similar path. When appropriate, I think it's important to share your story. As a matter of education, tell them about your program and your experience in school. It turned out that one of the pathologist's assistants, who I was a technician under, he had a family while he went to school. He was able to give me a lot of good advice as I was thinking about which school to apply to. I heard a lot of differing opinions on which schools they should have gone to. As you are educating people about potentially continuing their education, I think it's important to have frank and honest discussions about the admissions process, but as well as financial aid. Moving across the country or changing your job can be really stressful, and those sorts of assurances I think are important. At the end of the day, I would say become an educational resource, highlighting the importance of laboratory professionals as well as quality patient care. Also, giving back to the community that helped you reach your goals. Empowerment. What can you do to help people as they seek to continue their education in the lab? I would start by saying, write a personable letter of recommendation. If they're applying to that MLS program, write that letter of recommendation, write it personable, sign it. If they get admitted to school, follow up with them. I love, as a program director, hearing students talk about the PAs who helped them get into school and how they talked on the phone with them this weekend, and they gave them the encouragement and empowered them into continuing. Provide emotional support for them. At the end of the day, I would say be a positive influence for them while they're in school. Tell them about what's happening in your lab. Encourage them to come back and get a job and work right alongside you. Be the influence that you had, or maybe even better yet, be the influence you wish you had. As I've reflected on my path and how I've gotten to where I'm at, I owe a lot to those who have walked the path before me and had the courage to help and guide me. It was through encouragement, education, and empowerment that I've arrived here in Memphis, Tennessee. To each of us, I would say, invest your time and energy into developing the future generation of laboratory professionals. If each of us can reach out and help someone further their life, go to school, come back, and work in the lab, it improves the quality of healthcare within that lab, but also has the potential to improve the quality of that person's life. If you have any questions, here's my email at the bottom. And if you have any questions about starting a pathologist's assistant program or working through any of those processes, I'd be happy to help. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. So we had a couple of questions put in the chat, and I've thought about some things too. So if we can have our speakers, maybe I think everyone has their camera back on, so that's great. Feel free to put additional questions in the chat if you have. So where's the one question I wanted to start with? Okay, this comes from Laria to Dr. Bettina. How did the program justify continued operation during the years when cohorts had limited graduate numbers? Did the program's stability feasibility come into question during those years? And I guess that's actually a question that I would maybe put to each of you, because I think that is something that all of our educational programs are facing now. So why don't we start with you, Dr. Bettina?
Absolutely. It's a great question. So very fortunate in that the center director is local to the region and her background is nursing, and she has a great connection with all the hospitals who have constantly tell her the need of medical lab science. So I've had her, of course, I'm no longer there. We all know that I did leave, but during my 8 years there, the program stability never came into question. It was known that there was a need. The center director supported the program because of what she's hearing from the hospitals. So that was wonderful. And to my knowledge, it's never been in question. During the beginning, when we were running as a cost center, we were fortunate in that there were longstanding educational programs there that offset our cost. And that was something when we took our year to plan, we knew we were going to be a cost center in the beginning. And so there was a commitment made to nurture this program, to let those other programs kind of take the hit because they made money. We did not. And to let us get our feet established and a foundation there. So fortunate to have that support. I know not everyone has that, but that's how we did it.
I'd like to add a little bit from the UAMS perspective. Our program, I did not mention this, we're the oldest laboratory training program in the country, 106 years old this year. And our numbers had reduced over the years. And interestingly enough, it was the rural medical laboratory professionals that helped turn our program around, because our niche is distance education for rural students all over the country. However, we have an on-campus obligation to train for the state of Arkansas. And so as we were able to increase the number of students that we had from rural areas, we were able to go from being a cost utilizer to a cost or a financial generator for the university. It allowed us to hire a lot more faculty, provide better education. Our pass rates went up. So interestingly enough, the rural medical laboratory professionals helped the state of Arkansas in a great way. And so that's the other thing I would say is for training programs out there. If you can get a little momentum, it can really be good.
Michael, did you have comments about that?
Yeah, I'd say that to operate a pathologist assistant program is relatively inexpensive. I think the big bottleneck is in clinical rotation sites. You know, there's only a few schools operating right now. And so I think currently the application numbers every year are good. And in fact, we have to turn away many qualified applicants. So I would say to anyone who's considering opening a pathologist assistant program, I mean, it's a lot of work, but it's a pretty straightforward process, not requiring very large expenses outside of faculty up front.
And, Michael, I'm not sure if you could answer this question, because I think perhaps the program was sort of started at the time that you joined as program director, if I understood the timeline correctly. Is that right?
So when I got here, the chair of the department had started the state approval process.
Okay.
I helped bring it through the end of the state approval process, and then I started the program.
So that was sort of my question to you. For someone who, is interested, have a passion about this and want to start some kind of laboratory professional program in their area, do you have any, wisdom or anything to impart about how to approach the university, the leaders of the university for why we should have this? Because these aren't big money-making programs. They're programs with relatively few students in them, et cetera. What are your thoughts about that? And after you answer, if others have thoughts, I'd be interested in hearing.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think first and foremost, I would say you're going to want the support of the pathology department, the chair of pathology. Without their support, I think it would be very challenging to bring in such a program. Now that carries with it lots of nuance, because now you're also going to have to get the support of the hospital staff. And so there's a lot of discussions that need to be had beforehand, just between those two entities. Which hospital will sort of be home base? And then do you have the support of the pathologists? Now, you are correct in that traditionally pathologist assistant programs are relatively small. However, we also have a relatively small operating budget. We have 3 full-time faculty, and we'll have 20 students full-time beginning next year, and we'll already be paying for ourselves. So from a financial cost perspective, we might not be bringing in a lot of money into the institution, but we can definitely pay for ourselves relatively early in the process.
Do the other speakers have any comments about that?
I'd like to add, this is not from the MLS perspective necessarily, but from the MLT perspective, community colleges serve their local community. So getting the community leaders, the hospital leaders, to talk to the community college administration and say, we need this. The other thing that I found very useful is just to say this: if you don't have us, you're going to have some people who die. And how can they answer that? Do you want someone to die because you didn't act? And I say that sincerely because I believe it. And it's worked many times for me.
Yeah, we are definitely an essential service. We may not be visible, but we are an essential service, and we need to improve our visibility, which sort of leads me to the next type of question that I had is, what should we be doing as individuals or professional societies to raise the visibility of laboratory professional programs on our college campuses? We all hear all the time someone who got that bachelor's degree in biology and then they don't know what to do with it. And they, then they need another year or two of school to complete a laboratory professional program perhaps. And, what can we be doing as a professional society? There's the Career Ambassadors program with ASCP that isn't not geared to college students, but isn't particularly geared to college students. So what are your thoughts about that?
I'd be happy to speak first on this. I served as a Career Ambassador 2.0 for several years while in Southern California. And I spent a lot of my time presenting at community colleges. Community colleges would hold an education fair, and I thought that, and I felt that catching them early in their higher education process was better. So we'd spend a lot of time, and then it turned out that 3-4 years later, we would see applicants to our program. So I can speak for having success at going to the career fairs and being very active and being very vocal and proactive about talking to students, and it helped.
One thing I'll say is nobody cares more about the profession than you should as a professional. So when you're going through the checkout stand at Walmart, hey, how are you doing? What's your plans for the future? And just share the information. Like Michael was saying, share your story. We can be, in a sense, laboratory professional, whatever we represent, missionaries out there, and bring more in, because it's a grassroots type of thing. We have to do it, because if we don't do it, it's not going to happen.
And I'll add to what Michael was saying. We've had great success with summer camps, high school summer camps, a variety of them. So at West Virginia University, we have the medical lab science. Of course, we know we have pathologist assistants, thanks to Michael. And then we also have histotechnologists here. So when these students, high school students, come for whatever summer camp, we have a STEM summer camp, we have a summer camp that's actually done through our hospital volunteer office. We'll put them through all 3 programs so they get to see 3 different lab professions. And I got to say, they really love the organs, the toes, the fingers, they love it.
Thanks. So we have a couple more minutes. I have one more question, and then there's one in the chat that I'd like to address. So my question is, sort of related to recruiting students from rural areas, and if that's somehow different. Like you mentioned, Michelle, that only about 10% of students in the area around Hazard had a bachelor's degree. So is it difficult to get them to, engage in the idea of this type of education? What are the differences there? Like, I know in my program here, I've seen pushback from, some individuals from areas where, their relatives didn't get college degrees. And just, what are the special ways to reach those students? Does that make sense?
It does. I think having the presence in those community colleges and those other local colleges nearby really helped us. So we had a center recruiter, but then our full-time faculty would go out to those sites, and then myself as program director would go out to those sites and really build in those relationships with the students and the faculty there to try to draw them in. I found a lot of the students really wanted the higher education, but of course they were geographically bound. You needed to have some type of financial aid. You needed to have a support system. We see this in all our programs. Not everybody's successful, but we did have to have a good support system for those students as well. The biggest thing I kept seeing was the expectation from family that they stay in the area. I did have students that would come to Lexington after they graduated, get a job, and I was like, I'm going to see you do great things. And a year later, they're back in their hometown working, still doing great things, but it was a family obligation to come back.
Which can be a good thing, I think.
Absolutely.
So we are at 5 o'clock. I just want to keep talking to all of you because I'm having such a good time. But yeah, I think we need to end it now, I'm afraid. And I just want to thank everybody, especially the staff of the ASCP, for producing this series. Thanks to all of you for your inspiring talks and for everything you do to support education and particularly the rural workforce. You know, these are long-term issues, and if others have people listening to this call, or if you know someone who has a novel program or recruitment strategy, to help mitigate the workforce shortage, the ASCP is still interested in hearing these ideas. You know, we want to hear from you if you want to put write to ASCP via communications@ascp.org. We're going to continue to highlight Grow Your Own stories via ASCP publications or our online presence. So I just want to thank all of you so much for being here today, and I wish you a wonderful rest of the lab week. Have a great day. Bye now.